Hi, I'm Lauren, and welcome to the Afterlight. My amazing guest today is my dear friend, Veronica McClintic. Veronica is a nurse, a lawyer, a grandmother, a spiritual healer, and a certified ThetaHealing master practitioner and instructor. During the course of Veronica's life, she has endured and overcome more than many people experience in a lifetime. At the age of 9, Veronica was taken away from her parents. She lost 2 children 6 months apart, and she suffered a range of other issues. However, Veronica learned to heal herself and move forward with love, strength, forgiveness, and ease. Veronica is joining me today to share her story. Hello, my friend.
Hi, Lauren. Lovely to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you. Thank you for being here today. You are one of my favorite people in the world, so it means a lot that you're willing to share your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. No, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you, and I love always talking to you.
Me too. The feeling is mutual. So why don't we get started by you telling me in your own words a little bit about yourself, and when did your spiritual journey start?
Well, I can't actually put a date to that. I honestly believe that I've always had a so-called bent, if you like, towards spirituality.
Yeah.
I've always been one of those people that has always wanted to see people happy, including myself. Yeah. I always wanted to see the goodness in other people. And I always wanted to enjoy, helping others, doing things for other people. Always believed in kindness. I always strove for those sort of things. So I actually believe that I was always keyed into that, really from the beginning. So I can't give a date. And I certainly obviously didn't call it spirituality. I went to a Catholic school. And so I had formal religion in my life, in earlier years for a number of years. But then in 1988, I realised that spirituality is really something that's about yourself and creation, or the creator. And that really you have to take responsibility for who you really are. And not hide behind buildings and structures, but stand there before the Creator and be responsible for everything that you say, think, and do.
Yeah.
So in 1988, I joined a group which was on about meditation and healing one another through psychic ability. And also, moving energy, that is connecting with the creative energy and pulling that energy into the body and healing. So I guess, formally got involved with that in 1988. And ever since, I'll call it spirituality, my spirituality expanded enormously, and it is still expanding. And when I talk about my spirituality, it's not just a commitment to being the best that I can possibly be in terms of how I relate to myself and how I relate to other people. It's also, to me, is about tapping into my psychic ability and my own personal wisdom and tapping into the connection of creation and using that to not only help myself but help other people through what I would call spiritual healing.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit later about, listening to your heart versus your head and the importance of trust, because that's sort of what I'm getting from what you're saying is a lot of trust that comes into your healing journey. But before we talk about that, can we go back a little bit further? I know you were talking about from an early age that you felt a responsibility to almost be of service to others, and that in a way you were a compassionate and caring, which you still are, person. And I'm kind of curious if we could talk a little bit about some of the events that happened in your early years and how you were able to keep those qualities alive in yourself where other people may not have done that. So can you talk to me a bit about what happened when you were around the age of 9?
Well, actually, before the age of 9, I lived in Darwin in the Northern Territory, Australia, and my life was a very simple one. I lived with my parents and brother and sister, and unfortunately, both my parents had issues with drinking alcohol, I guess abusing alcohol, and so that presented obviously a number of challenges for me, and it eventually led to us being taken away, the children being taken away from our parents, and being placed, in other places. But I've got to say that my time with my parents, because we never ever went back and lived with them when I was taken away, and that was the age of 9. I've got to say that at all times my parents were very loving people. They were extremely loving, caring people, and they taught us what real love actually was. And for me, I think that was very important because I knew how to be, that taught me how to be kind to other people.
Yeah.
And just how to relate to them in a loving way. But of course, the unfortunate side of having parents who have alcohol problems, it's a very hard, challenging one, because with that, it brought about a lot of shame, a lot of frustration and sadness and sorrow, because nobody wants to see their parents, be drunk and out of control and silly, basically. And so there was always this constant struggle of, finding your place in that, if you like. I can remember a very emotional moment, and to this very day I still remember it. I must have been about 5 years old when I was coming home on the bus from school, and I could feel this. Sorry, I'm feeling a bit emotional at the moment, so I've got to focus on not letting that throw me too much. But this horrible feeling in the bottom of my tummy, thinking, oh my God, I hope they're not drunk today.
Take your time.
And so it's, and I remember that sick feeling, and then it's almost, you're a bit, there's this fear of going home and not knowing what you're going to find.
It sounds to me like you would have had a chance at a very young age to rely on yourself,
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah, and to practice resilience.
Exactly. And I think, life, the way I see life is this, and that is, I believe that before we come to this earth in any lifetime, and I believe in the fact that, we do keep coming to learn lessons. And I also believe that we decide what lessons we want to learn in a given lifetime. We choose the people that we want to, I guess, play those lessons out with. You know, I believe we choose our parents and everybody else who's in our life.
It would be hard, even knowing that knowledge, to sometimes live that out. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that it's the experiences that you had as you age that allowed you to understand that. But at the time, I'm sure it wasn't as clear.
Oh, no, because as a child, you don't know, obviously you don't know those things. I mean, some children are lucky enough to have parents who will explain this spiritual wisdom to you.
Yeah.
But I certainly didn't get that. But yeah, so these lessons that you go through, you do learn. You learn through experience and through feeling. And the thing is, the challenge is, well, okay, what do you do with that learning?
Yeah.
What do you do with the effects of that suffering that you may have encountered or trauma that you have encountered? Because we are beings that have free will, we can choose. I honestly believe that the Creator has put us here to give us the opportunity to choose our lives, to create our lives. And so through the trauma and these hardships, for example, the things that I went through, and I'm happy to talk about it later on when I lost 2 children, I was really brought to my knees then out of that trauma. And I'll just explain this just to, get through what I'm trying to say. I had a choice of learning out of that, accepting what happened, and then moving forward in a positive way, or meaning I could pull my socks up and make a commitment to being positive and getting the most out of life, right, moving forward. But I also had a choice of allowing myself to become victim, to surrendering, to just simply giving up. And I did not want to choose that. Don't get me wrong, there were times when, and there still are times when I get very sad and sometimes frustrated. And that's all okay to have those sorts of feelings. That's part of the journey of healing.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the other side, I did not want to accept that. I wanted to overcome. I'll just talk a little bit more about that other choice, if you like, the negative choice of that. That can be a journey which starts off as you feeling like a victim. You can become very, very angry, very resentful. You could resort to violence, both to yourself and to other people. And so all of that can obviously create tremendous problems with yourself, but where does it take you? It only takes you further down the hole of darkness, meaning that you certainly don't bring joy and happiness and fulfillment to yourself. Not at all. So I did not want to go there. And in fact, there are people who also choose to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And, I'm not being judgmental of those that do actually commit suicide, but that was something, that even was sort of presented to me, if you like, but I worked through that. So going back to this whole thing of choices, of lessons and so on, I obviously chose for whatever reason, all those things that I have been through, to learn from them. Because when you learn from them, that is what really makes you more enlightened. You become more spiritual, if you like. And it makes your wisdom and your knowledge a lot more richer. It increases your knowledge. It awakens you to who you really are. And we're all amazing, amazing beings, but we have forgotten we need to awaken. And it's when you have when you go through these lessons or these experiences, some experiences are not as traumatic as some, as what I was just talking about. But we can choose to learn and choose to see the positive things. And some of these positive lessons are wisdom, understanding, patience, forgiveness, kindness, unconditional love. These are the things that you learn. And that's the positive stuff. That's the richness and the goodness that comes out of that suffering. And that's the way I basically see my life. So for all the things that I have been through, I look at it like that. Because if I chose the other path of focusing on my pain and staying in that zone of being the victim, guess what? I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you right now.
No, agreed. I think that when I hear your stories, the word that comes to mind is resilience. And it's so powerful, I think, to look back at your younger self and the trauma of having to be taken from your parents and to still be resilient enough to come out of that with grace and unconditional love and forgiveness, like you were talking about. And it almost seems to me that experience and being able to move past that or through that experience really allowed you almost the foundation of being able to deal with the loss of 2 children.
It certainly played a big part. Yeah. It definitely did. And yes, resilience is the thing. You become resilient. You don't get caught up in that victim stuff of blaming other people and even blaming yourself.
Yeah, which I'm sure would have been easy to do. Can you talk to me a little bit about the loss of your 2 children? You feel okay to talk about that?
All right, I will. When I lost my 2 children, the older one was a 12-year-old girl. She had cancer, and she went into remission for a small while, and then it came back, and then eventually she passed. She had that from the age of 9, and then she passed away at 12. And I also had a baby who had Down syndrome, and she was born very, very small. She was only 700 grams. She had lung issues. And anyway, that was very hard because she was in hospital basically for 2 years before she passed away. But I fought to get her home so that I could look after her at home. And when she actually did come home, she only survived for 2 weeks. But during that time of the struggle with the baby, that's when my older daughter became worse. And to cut a long story short, basically they both passed away in the same year, 6 months apart. And it was very hard because just prior to that, we had to leave our home and go to Adelaide, where the baby was in intensive care. And at that time, my 12-year-old daughter was in Darwin, and we were told she only had 12 months to live. And so it was really difficult, where I felt so divided because I was down in Adelaide with this baby and my 12-year-old daughter was in Darwin, and me knowing that she only had 12 months to live. And so we went through, it was such a traumatic time, and so much in it.
Yeah.
So I'm really sort of, I guess, skimming over a lot of the trauma and the drama. But I've got to honestly say to you that that was the most traumatic time of my life, I think, because the suffering was one of how do I get through on an hour-by-hour basis. And that was really, really difficult. And it was like you just could not see any light out of any tunnel. There were no bright moments. It was just grueling suffering. And it went on for so long, it seemed, almost 2 years or more. And it was interesting because the way I got, well, one way that I did get through was having lots of afternoon sleeps. And it just seemed like that was the only time that I could escape from the pain. And an interesting thing that used to happen was I would go to sleep, and then I would sort of escape to a couple of other lifetimes. And they were interesting lifetimes, but they were so peaceful. And then I would just go off to sleep. And I don't know if you want to know anything about those lifetimes, but they were just lovely escapes. Anyway, so I came out of that trauma.
Do you think that, that was your mind's way, your spirit's way of almost balancing the trauma and the tragedy of your current lifetime by showing you these glimpses of these peaceful lifetimes? And when you mention that, are you alluding to actual past life feeling? Is that sort of what you were talking about with your dreams?
I don't believe they were dreams, because it was like I was almost consciously going into them. I'll tell you what they were.
Yes.
These may not have been past lives. They could have been parallel lives. It didn't matter to me. One of them was I was a boy who was roughly about, I don't know the exact age, maybe 15, 16, and he was in India. He lived in India. And he was obviously very poor. There was this family that allowed him to sleep on their veranda on a shelf. And his job would be to pull people around in those carts,
Like a tuk-tuk cart or something.
Yes. So he would pull them and take them from one spot to another. But the beautiful thing about this guy was, as poor as he was, he didn't see himself as that. He didn't see himself as being in sufferance. He was very peaceful and relaxed. He would wake up, he would do his job, he would come home and he was so tired, and he would just go to sleep. And he loved going to sleep. It was interesting. And that was his life. And I just loved that. That was one lifetime. The other one, I could see myself in a cave. I don't know where. It was in a cold country, in a mountainous area. The cave was very high, and we slept on skins. And I would always get this image of sleeping next to a campfire, and it would be nighttime, and I would have a couple of children sleeping next to me. And I would look out of the cave, and it would be a moonlit night. And I could see an older man next to the campfire, just putting on it and just sitting there and watching over. And he was like a grandfather. But I could see this beautiful moon, and I would be lying on the skin and looking out. And the peace and the calm that I felt was unbelievable, to the point it brings tears to my eyes. And I think those lifetimes were showing me that no matter, see, we in this Western culture tend to be very judgmental when we look at people who are not terribly well dressed, who don't have houses that we do, comfortable beds, etc., etc. We tend to think that they must be in sufferance. But they may not necessarily be, because these both lifetimes showed me that you didn't have to have much at all to have that deep peace with the presence. It was just beautiful. And so And that's what gave me that peace. That's what got me through that dreadful time where each day was a challenge to get through.
Have you had those dreams since?
No.
No. One thing that you mentioned that really stood out for me, and you've kind of just talked about it there as well, you made reference to hour by hour. Do you feel that looking at your life hour by hour helped you to sort of process the pain and to find your feet again?
When I talked about the hour to hour, what I was actually talking about was surviving hour by hour. It was like I couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like I can wake up now and I think, oh, wow, today is Wednesday. What am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D, and gee, I look forward to going and doing my shopping. Do you know, you can see that light. You can plan your day. You can get excited about something. It wasn't like that then. All it was just pain and sadness. And it was like, I just don't know if I can keep going. That's how dramatic it was. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I went through a number of emotions, like a time where I was generally positive and wanted to keep going. I'd get up and get dressed, ready to go to the hospital, and I would do my things, even though I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? But then I went through another set of emotions when I was in Adelaide, when the baby was in intensive care and I was separated from my daughter. It was very extreme then, and that's when it just got worse. In fact, I don't even know how I survived through that.
So when your daughters passed, and even through that time leading up to that, how or what role did your spirituality play in that? Were you able to, did you have the mindset at the time that you had chosen these lessons? Was that even a thought process? I know you found
yes, it was.
Healing in dreaming, but did you find healing while you were awake as well?
I can categorically say that if it was not for my spiritual understanding and my spiritual practice, I would not be sitting here talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I thank God that I became, from 1988, became very, very consciously aware a lot of spiritual things, of who I was and how I wanted to be, how I wanted to conduct my life.
Yeah.
And I was meditating every night as well. I had a really good, strong spiritual practice before all that drama occurred with my daughters. And I believe that is what kept me sane and kept me moving. Big lessons were learnt, obviously.
Yeah, but it does say a lot about your character as well, that you were able to, like you said, you were able to choose the higher, well, for lack of a better example or expression, the higher road in this case for yourself. And I would think that, being a Theta healing practitioner and a spiritual healer as well, that your story has given you an opportunity to connect with people in a way that, maybe who have undergone similar tragedy in a different way than had you not experienced that.
Oh, absolutely. Let's just go one step back. Lessons that I learned, for example, when I went through the deaths of my daughters, were things such as whatever is God's will, let it be. Because I had to deal with this thing. A lot of people would say, why does God allow two beautiful young children to pass away?
Yeah.
And that's really hard. But through my beliefs, and that is that our souls choose what they want. They came, they chose me to have their experience with, and I accepted that. And they chose to go when they wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to learn to accept that. And I did accept that. It was hard. That's not to say that I don't have any grief, sadness, sorrow. I do.
Of course.
And I've had to do a lot of healing, and I'm still healing from that.
Now, is one thing that helped you through that your practice of Theta healing? And can you talk about Theta healing, Veronica, especially for those who aren't familiar with that?
Well, it's not, I don't just practice Theta healing when I do my healing consultations, but I use a lot of the techniques. Just in a nutshell, Theta healing is a wonderful modality which was started by Diana Steibel, whom I have so much love and respect for. But it's basically about connecting with the Creator, basically putting forward with intention, what healing you want, and then visualizing it and believing that it's going to happen. It's done in a meditative state, and when you do connect with the Creator, your brain goes into theta wave, and there are many different prayers that are a part of that, and anybody who's actually interested in that, I would urge them to actually buy Diana's book and have a look at it.
When you heal someone, do you feel like you're healing them or you're helping them heal themselves? And do you heal as well during that process? Is there a bit of an exchange, do you think?
Well, I don't heal anybody. It's the Creator that heals. I just simply put out the intention and I visualize. And I believe that I also act as a facilitator, if you like. It's the Creator that really does the healing. And I feel that every time I do heal somebody, that yes, I also receive healing as well.
Mm-hmm. So can you talk to me a little bit about your healing process? Some of our listeners might not have heard of healing before, and they might not know what it's even used for. So do you think you could give me some examples of, maybe some of the clients you've had, obviously no names or anything, but, how healing can help and sort of the process in the way that you do your healing?
All right. Well, basically the healing that I do, and as I said, it is through the Creator. Healing can take place on many levels. There can be physical healing, there can be mental, emotional healing, and then there's the spiritual healing that takes place. And when I do these sessions with people, I always start off the psychic scan, and I will be shown and given, and it's usually what it turns out to being is the thing that's to be dealt with on the day that they come. That's not to say that other things are not dealt with, but whatever I get, I tell the person, and I don't get the full story straight up, but I tell them what I see or what I hear, and if they're accepting or they can recognise it or it sits with them, I ask them permission if that's what they want to deal with. And then I also say, and why did you come here? Often it works out that what I am seeing is actually connected to why they've come. So it's an interesting process, but this is not all clear in the first few minutes. But as the session progresses, it works out. And
can I interrupt you for a minute, Veronica? I'm familiar with what you mean when you say a psychic scan, but others may not be. So can you explain a little bit about that? So a person comes to you, you're meeting them for the first time. Obviously you introduce yourself and you want to proceed initially with the psychic scan. Now, do you do that do you go into some sort of meditation? Do you close your eyes and imagine looking at the person, or do you look at them with your naked eye? How does that psychic scan sort of play out?
Well, with the psychic scan, before the person comes, I always make sure that I've done a cleansing and balancing on myself. I've asked for protection. I always do a cleansing, balancing and protection of my healing room. So I've set the scene, if you like, and I also open up my chakras. The chakras are always open, really, but it's, you know, you become very focused, and then when the person comes, I'm already in a theta state.
Okay.
If you like, my brain waves in a theta state. So when I sit with the person, I will, through the creator, I will just focus on the person psychically, using psychic ability. Because as you know, we have chakras in our body. Each of the chakras have different functions. And for example, there's a chakra between your eyes, the third eye, that enables one to actually see things. And often when I look at somebody, I can see various things. I might be shown symbols, pictures, different colours that will tell me various things of, oh, you have a blockage in a particular area, or you must be carrying abuse. Because often when I see darkened energy, for example, in the abdomen, that will tell me that there is abuse. It could be emotional, it could be sexual abuse, any type of abuse. And or the other thing too is you've got the chakra at the throat. That is the one where you can hear, you know, guides, ancestors as well, and get information through that. So it's like using other communication, if you like. So our bodies don't just hear and see and taste and touch. We have other senses.
Yeah.
As the third eye and as the one in your throat, through that, the chakra there, and also feeling. And you're using the chakra there just below your rib cage in your solar plexus.
Right.
And you can feel. So, yeah, it's using a number of abilities to pick up information. But at the end of the day, I basically let the client know exactly what I'm seeing, hearing and feeling. And I always ask permission, by the way, before I do any type of healing with the person. Basically, it's the person that really is guiding the session, because I don't deal with anything that they're not aware of or that they don't want to deal with, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're seeing these things, are you sort of seeing them in your imagination in a way, or in your real eyesight?
I guess one way of describing it is like in your imagination.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else do you, encapsulate when you're doing your healing practices? Because I know that often your client will lie on a bed, and
I don't always use the bed. In fact, these days generally they just sit in a chair and I sit next to them. I don't even have to touch them. But sometimes it's nice to, touch a person's hand.
Yeah.
It depends. But basically healing can be done without touching.
Obviously, it goes without saying that you've demonstrated incredible healing in your own journey and in your own life. Where have you seen other examples of the power of healing play out?
I see it constantly, because people will actually tell you things like, oh, I just feel so much more peaceful. I feel lighter. I feel more positive. And I'm clear about that now. I understand that. So what they're actually doing is they're actually feeling the energetic shifts that are taking place. I've had people come to me with who have been cursed, for example, and the Creator has removed those curses. And some of them can be horrific. family curses or individual curses, and it's prevented them from, moving forward in their lives because they've been held back in terms of, really embracing life. I've seen, that lifted and them being able to really just get on with life, that type of thing. I've had situations where somebody's come and they've been really, really depressed and just couldn't see anything positive at all. And by the end of the session, the person was just basically said, I actually feel happy. Yeah, and in fact, in that particular case, it happened to be that it was discovered through the session that this person was abandoned by their father when their mother was giving birth to them.
Wow.
So there's a number of, case scenarios that I can talk about off the record here. Maybe I could sort of collect a few for you.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I think that sometimes people get used to living a certain way. Oh, I've always had a weird knee, or I've always, had bouts of anxiety and depression, without realizing that maybe there's an ability for them to work through that to have a better quality of life.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is where a lot of my healing is focused on. Exactly. And a lot of it is connected to past life issues as well, and past trauma.
Right. Do you think that people have to have a willingness to heal, though? Do you ever have anyone come to you and they go, you've been referred, I always have this issue, but they almost like that issue. They want to use that issue as a crutch to kind of stop them from maybe living the best life possible. I'm sure you've seen examples of that where people are afraid to be who they really are, or quit that job, or move to that place, whatever the case may be. Do you think, do people need to want to heal, or is there sometimes a greater force that moves them along?
Well, I believe anyone can be healed, and yes, they have to basically accept the healing, but perhaps in the beginning, healing can take place about removing some of that fear and that anxiety, so that they believe that, that the pastures are greener on the other side, if they did surrender to healing. But the thing is, there is such a thing as divine timing. If healing is meant to take place, it is going to take place. So there's a right time for it.
Right.
If it doesn't happen today, it might happen next week. So there's the divine timing issue. There's another thing too, that there are people who are actually ready to pass away and they don't want to heal, and that's fine. That's their choice.
Yeah.
And perhaps the healing session can be about them just finding peace, just dealing with past trauma, resentments, and so on, and just finding the peace. But the thing is, some people don't want to move forward. I'll give you an example. It might be somebody who, they've got some disease, and for the first time they're getting attention by their partner, and they don't really want to heal. So it really is up to the person at the end of the day. But the healer can do a lot to help the person, believe in themselves and to see other aspects or other ways of moving forward.
What responsibility do you believe spiritual teachers and healers have?
I think the responsibilities they have is, number one is truth.
Yeah.
Is to be truthful, to be honest. As a healer, I always believe that one must conduct themselves from the point of unconditional love and truth, and not from exaggerated ego, because there are so many people out there who are just so focused on just basically money on its own. I mean, there's nothing wrong with accepting money. I mean, in a business, that's, you know, you're in business to make money.
Yeah.
But there is such a thing as, you know, what is fair and what is just, and what is good service for what is being charged.
Yeah.
And also, I think the other thing is that I feel a healer should be authentic and genuine, and really always be responsible for looking after themselves spiritually.
So when somebody goes to a healer or a psychic or someone in the spiritual realm, let's say, that is, let's say, charging services, do you think there's a responsibility for the person who goes there to also decide whether or not the information they're being presented with is the right information for them?
Well, I think that's where the truth comes in. I always explain to the person, you know, how I work, who I am connected to, and I will say, well, this is what I get. But I will also say to the person, at the end of the day, you have free will, and you must stand in your power, and you make the decisions of what you accept and what you don't, and that you don't need other people to tell you how to actually live your life and make your choices, because that is your right. And you have the power to do it. I am here to support you, to give you the strength and the focus to place yourself in that position to be able to do that.
How do you think people learn to trust themselves?
I think at the bottom of that is all about self-love. And that was one thing I had to struggle with, because having been taken away as a child, I had big issues of you know, lack of self-love and trusting others and so on. Yeah, I think, and that's a real journey of healing that self-love, because I think once you realise that, you know, you are truly a spark of God, you come from pure love, and that just coming into this zone, you know, we have many cloaks of negativity that we carry, of anger, hate, guilt, resentment, fear, jealousy, all those things, that are on your journey of life. And if you're on the spiritual path and you really want to consciously focus on that, the challenge is to get rid of all those cloaks of negativity.
One of the journeys that I've had to go through in life is also the journey of developing self-love. And one of the ways that I did that was I got very clear early on that I didn't love myself. And it was through years of becoming aware of the thoughts in my mind that weren't supportive and replacing those thoughts with truths. And as I grew up, those truths evolved to being from, you know, I like myself to I love myself. And that was over years.
Absolutely.
How do you think, is that a good way to get started? Or how would you recommend, if somebody's listening now and they're recognizing that they don't in fact love themselves, how would you recommend that they get started on that journey?
Well, what I would say to someone, I think this is where meditation's a good thing, because we need to first of all have a conversation with ourselves. Often we get so busy that we forget about ourselves. We're too busy talking to everybody else and everything else. But when you stop and you meditate, or just have a quiet time, and you just listen to your body, and you can connect to the Creator and say, well, what is it that I'm not happy about in my life? Be honest. And then write down the things that just don't make you happy. And it could be, oh, I'm so fat, I'm ugly, or whatever it is. Doesn't matter what it is. That's where you start, I believe. Then, through the connection with the Creator, ask to help you to heal those things. So we're talking about connection, becoming aware of who you are and what your little roadblocks are, and then working at how to deal with those things. And there's so much help out there through healers, counsellors and others to help you with those things. And then, because it can be a bit of a journey. Sometimes some people can just get it and move through it all very quickly, and other times For others, it takes a long time. And I feel that you've just got to be patient, but you've got to keep working at these things and stay positive. And I would highly recommend reading Eckhart Tolle's work. It is tremendous, and I refer to his work constantly.
So do I.
It's just unbelievable information. But yeah, it's about stopping in your tracks, giving yourself permission to look within, because sometimes we're too scared to do that. Finding out why we are not happy, listing them, and then start working on them. Because when I say working, what you're doing is you are becoming conscious about your blocks. That's the beginning. And then start getting help. I mean, if somebody came to me with some of those blocks, I would conduct a healing session as I discussed earlier.
Yep.
And start moving on them, because spiritual healing is an amazing thing, because it can deal with things that counsellors cannot deal with, or psychologists, like past life stuff, curses, entities, that sort of stuff. So I would recommend a range of things. Open your mind to all these things. Yeah. Because it's a journey of self-learning. See, the problem with us today is that a lot of us have given our power away. We've allowed ourselves to be controlled by everybody else and everything else. We've forgotten that, we've got a brain. We can work things out. And the doctor cannot help you with everything. They can help you with drugs and surgery, and they can send you here and there, but there's a lot more to it. Go to a dietitian who will help you with the food. Go to a physiotherapist who are masters at, dealing with your muscles and so on. But spiritual healers can also tap into things that no one else can. And then slowly one discovers who they are. And all these things can be remedied, and you have to have belief. And through this, when you discover yourself, look into the mirror and say, you know what? Yeah, you are fat and you're this and you're that, but guess what? I love you, warts and all. And learn to love that, because none of us are actually perfect, whatever that is. Yeah. We are all unique, beautiful beings in our own right, and we have to love that. And to realise that it's outside control is what's made us feel inferior. Agreed. Through our difference. Because we are all different. Let's face it, we've all got different shaped noses and different coloured hair and all this. But and it's about just loving ourselves for who we are. And it goes back to the way you started the talk, which is about taking responsibility for who you are. Yes, nobody else can. And this is another thing. When we start blaming other people and expecting other people to save us or to tell us how to be, what we're actually doing is we're giving away our power. We're saying, basically, in a sense, I don't know who I am. I'm nothing. You tell me who I am. And that's where the problem lies. Until people realise that they must take back their power, look into that mirror and say, I know who you are and I love you, and you have all that it takes. You have the answers, which we do. Agreed. We do. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. We've gone over the hour. I know that that's what you had allocated for today. Veronica, thank you so much for just being open and honest as always, and just full of unconditional love and truth. Whenever I talk to you, I always feel better for it. I'd love to have you back on the show if you're open to it, because there are a lot of things that I didn't get to today, such as talking about meditation. I want to talk to you about other healing stories that you've got to share, just things like that. So if you're willing to come back on the show, maybe we can delve into all of that next time. I would love to do that, Lauren.
Fabulous. So if someone wants to get a hold of you to inquire further or to maybe get a healing from you, can I just direct them to your website?
That would be good. Or my email, which you know.
Yep. In the podcast, there's a show notes section. I'll add that all in there. And I'll also put some links to Vienna's books on Theta healing and also Eckhart Tolle's books as well.
Yes.
And
wonderful.
yeah. And I'll link to your Facebook page as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.